might work. Just
all right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first, I believe this is the first official meeting for the analytics section. Hopefully everyone's got the agenda open. We've got a bit to cover. But yeah, just wanted to welcome everyone. Thanks for the emoji. Appreciate the support. So yeah, as far as just kind of housekeeping items, I wanted to let everyone know that we have a new group for the section. Links included in the agenda. I know Product Intelligence has had their own group and stuff organized. So Elena, I mentioned if you wanted to move things over. Seems like we could just go ahead and do that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I was just looking at the private repos, and I was a bit concerned to not make them accidentally public without making sure that everything is okay there. But I'll take a deeper look and add my notes in the issue that I shared there.
Privacy should be retained. I'm not able to actually create anything that's not everything I create under the section is private. I don't even have an option for creating public. So that should be okay. But we could test it out if we need to. Cool. Awesome. So it'll be good to have everything in one place. I'll be working on.
So just to revise one thing, I think the question to ask would be, there's going to be GitLab maintainers who are members of the GitLab org project who aren't GitLab employees. So that would be the one group that, even if that group is private, would still have access to that project that we just need to clarify. I think that's okay, but I think just walking through that logic, that's the group that we should ask the question about.
Got it. Definitely worth keeping in mind. I guess if we need to, we can create a separate group outside of that space for anything that's super private. Cool. Then on to hiring updates. I think, Tim, you can start us off.
yes. First of all, also hello to everyone and thanks for joining. I just wanted to give you a brief update. So Alina is still acting EM and is doing a fantastic job there. Thanks again for all your support. But we are also at the same time trying to hire a new engineering manager for that role and are currently in the final steps for making an offer. I really hope that we can get this out of the door in the next 24 hours. So everyone cross your fingers, but then we should have a really nice EM coming in for this team. And as soon as I have everything signed, hopefully then I will basically give you another update what the timeline looks like and who the person is. Yeah, over to you, Dennis.
Yeah, so we finally, thanks to Tim, got the positions and recs approved from all, finance, recruiting, all that stuff. So product analytics is looking for 2 backend engineers and 2 front-end engineers as well. So the internal job postings are live. We've had some interest internally, and so we're receiving those, which is great. At the same time, I'm working on the job descriptions so that we can get the public job postings out. And so that's my goal for basically as soon as possible this week, but by the end of this week, we'll at least have the public posts for us to start accepting applicants from outside. And then it's on to Kenny.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, so the PM for Product Intelligence was just open last week. That's Amanda's backfill. And the PM for Product Analytics has been open for, I think, about 3 weeks. And we've got 3 candidates in the pipeline. Some of you might be on interview panels for those candidates. So I think one was in interviews last week. I'm going to also drop the job family links for the GitLab handbook content of the job posting, and then I'll see if I can dig up the greenhouse more public where you can directly apply links to. But they're both open internally and externally. I'd love to have internal candidates for either one of those positions. So if you know people internally or externally, please feel free to point them my way or vice versa.
All right. I think it's on
over to demos.
Tim.
Good. Yeah, so I'm really excited to share a couple of things today that we have been working on in the analytics team over the last couple of weeks. So you might be aware of the original plan, which was to basically integrate PostTalk, which is like an open source analytics solution. And that was the original plan or basically mission briefing to see that we can get this included, imported, introduced to GitLab to some extent. This was basically stopped very early due to a couple of limitations, including license and problems there. So what we did back then is take another look. What are the options that we have out there where we can jumpstart basically the whole topic, but at the same time, not start completely from scratch. And to the other side, also, please don't have something that is basically directly in GitLab that people can use and where we can actually rethink to some extent the whole analytics space from the perspective that we are doing. So we went ahead, did a lot of looking at different projects, POCs, open source libraries, and so on. And today I'm quite proud to show you a couple of things that are a so-called vision POC, which means that this should share with you the vision where we want to go. And some things are working already, which is also nice to simply see how the technology works, how easy it is to integrate. On the other hand, some things are completely fake and are basically showing you just what we want to accomplish over the next couple of months. On one hand with the analytics team, but tightly related to the product intelligence team. And this is something that I think we can see and transform over the next couple of weeks and months, is where do those two teams basically handle the different topics. Both on one hand, starting to dog food as soon as possible this new solution, but also get all the feedback from the product intelligence team. And then to some extent also that having the product intelligence team most probably also working on those product features. So let me share my screen, which is a complex task at its own. Good. So what do we have? I was looking at a couple of different libraries and setups that we were that are around in the whole realm of analytics, and also to some extent take a look at a lot of the different products that are on the market. What advantage do they have, but also on the other hand, what complications do they have, or what problems do they have in nowadays with the architecture that they might have chosen a couple of years ago. Then I talked to a lot of you in the product intelligence team, took a lot of looks at different issues and roadmaps and everything that was implemented, and especially taking a look on all the hard topics that we currently have, getting basically tracking into the product on one hand, and on the other hand, getting something out of that data and making it visualized. So the current suggestion where we want to move to is the following. Nowadays, a lot of analytics products have the problem that they have data in a SaaS solution, which means that they have already the problem that they can't determine very easily where the data is stored. So there's a huge topic going on in the European Union around is Google Analytics legal or not, data privacy, and so on. So that's why there's currently a huge wave incoming of open source tools and other tools that are basically having this first privacy and basically first person owned data as one of the main stories. And that's also something I want to follow along here, is to see that we can provide a solution to our customers that they can own their own data and have a very quick entry point. So the idea is that we basically provide them with so-called tracking components that they can go ahead and simply can say, okay, I'm coming in, I want to use GitLab for tracking. And we set for them up a tracking component. I think we need a good name for it. It's in reality, it's set up either Docker or Kubernetes, which consists of 3 components. So what the idea is quite simple. So you go in on your workspace and say, I want to start tracking, and you can say, okay, I want to start a new tracking component in which data storage. So in which data region, you can start in the US or you can start in Europe. And we go ahead and basically set up an instance or a mesh which contains 3 technologies. On one hand, Jitsu, which is a toolkit for data tracking and data transformation. It contains a couple of other sub-libraries. We'll take a look at that in a second. For data storage, ClickHouse. And the third component that is basically part of this box would be basically KubeDev, which is a business intelligence solution, which provides us with a really nice interface to analyze that data and make this available for analytics. Because on one hand, it takes away all the hard work of caching, API layers, authentication, and so on. And on the other hand, it provides already view components that you can introduce into your product to basically build queries, build views, and so on. As soon as you have clicked OK, I go ahead, I come in, I want to select the use case, I want to do web mobile analytics. I have no own data store, so we are going to set up ClickHouse for this. You go ahead and set up a region. And we will then basically in the next step go ahead and do a setup in our cloud environment to set up an instance. Why is this important? First of all, the whole first person story, but on the other hand, what we can provide here is we have tons of self-managed. The problem with self-managed is that self-managed most of the time is not 100% available. So if you want to do tracking with your application, this would mean that your application needs a 100% data connection all the time to your GitLab instance, which is a very hard thing to do. So the idea is to basically deploy this into a data store, into a cloud service, so that also self-managed can go ahead and say, okay, I'm connecting my application there, I'm connecting my self-managed to the tracking instance, and we can both get there and get the data and have there the uptime that we need for the whole tracking story. On top of that, this opens up a really nice business model, which is very much directed, because that's the hard part for analytics companies, is the more events that you basically track, the harder it becomes and the more expensive it becomes, the whole story. So this would be very hard to say, okay, free tier can give you how many events and so on. So this means really that you have a expense that is based on the amount of events that we are going to track for you. This is the main tracking part, classic web tracking, app event tracking. You can do everything with it. It has already tons of different SDKs included that we can build on top of it. The other thing that I saw, especially that we are struggling, but also others are struggling, is that we're trying to some extent do counts for things that we anyhow have in our in our production database. So we have in the production database, how many projects do we have? How many namespaces do we have? On the other hand, almost every product or web product out there has some sort of users, groups to some extent, or different membership statuses. So something that is modeled very closely connected to that. So the idea, and that's something that Jitsu is able to provide us, is to do a data transformation pipeline, so that you are not only starting this tracking box with just tracking ahead, but that you basically tell the tracking component, hey, this is my data storage that stores all my production data. Please also ingest from this data source also these tables, this information, etc. And we can do this very easily because Jitsu is basically providing us this under the hood, whereas there's a system called Airbyte, which is providing tons of different data transformation pipelines. So a classic example, it even imports GitLab, by the way, but you can go ahead, any sort of database you can basically import all the time, but you can also have Shopify, WordPress, all the classic things that are basically going along to your product where you are going to track stuff. So this is one of the basic ideas, is to, on one hand, have the tracking intake, and on the other hand, have the possibility to import next to that tracking data, production data from your product. And then we can go ahead and very easily say, okay, the user ID that you are identifying all the time in your tracking is, by the way, the ID here in this table. And with that and a diagram on Postgres and MySQL or whatever database we are using, we should have a better understanding what we might be able to connect there, so that you can then, and the product manager can go ahead and can segment at a later point, hey, I want to see only analytics for Ultimate users. I want to have everyone that is basically part of our project group that is more than 1,000 people, and so on. And this gives us way more possibilities that we wouldn't have, or basically all the time do, in a very different and complex way to connecting those two data storages. Good. So that's the other idea behind it, is that we can go ahead and import into the same ClickHouse data storage also your product data. And now I'm happy to show you a little bit what we are already able to do with this. And what we have in the same tracking component is also we have a kubedev instance running. Kubedev is basically, or kubejs, I'm not sure 100% what the naming is of it is. It's basically a business intelligence open source library. It's a complete setup that provides you with different APIs, different front-end components, tons of data analysis topics, and has really nice integrations so that you can basically connect it from your application. But we would be also able to support from day one all the funky BI tools that are ahead of it, so that all the data scientists that you still have in your team could still work with the data. So it supports Apache Superset and tons of other BI tools that are around to connect to your own data. And that's the main part of the story, that you as a company own this data directly and no one else in between. Good. What do we have based on kubedev? Is that you have a very easy query language that you can build components with, and you basically set up in the playground, take that, take it to the view component, and you have very easily and very fast those queries in your product. So this is already live data. You can see that this is basically mainly run through the RSpecs that are running against the test instances, which are then creating tracking data all the time. So this is why we had already 41,000 sessions of headless Chrome in there and working on that platform, basically, and providing us with data. The big topic, and that is something I saw that you did in product intelligence, which I think is a very, very good thing for nowadays web application. I think this is a perfect pattern, is to not only have on one hand the URL, which is the classic pattern that every tracking page out there has and is tracking against, but we also have this page identifier or page name. And I think this makes much more sense nowadays, because you have a view or a page that is basically then used and represented in tons of different URLs. And then you have a very hard time going back in time and say, okay, all those 3,700 URLs that you see here is all just one view, but I'm in reality, most of the time, rather interested in that view. So the thought process was, let's take this and make this a first-class citizen, so that we can go ahead and basically a product manager can go in and can say exactly the tracking stuff that you are using. Because what I did here is I integrated the Jitsi tracking code directly into GitLab, the instance. So this is already instance tracking that is based on real-world data. So we are basically tracking, saying, okay, what are the unique IDs? And then you can go ahead and say, okay, I want to limit and see everything that I see in the dashboard only based on activity that is happening in the groups realm. And we can go ahead and do also stars, so that you can say everything in groups and below. And we can build full trees so that product managers especially can go ahead and can go and say, just give me that information, because I'm not interested in the whole package, but rather I want to have a clear focus on something. The other big part is, and this is classic demo time, I need to reset the view, otherwise it's not going back to the original data, is that you can limit this also to weeks. And that's the nice part. This is all working with against not ClickHouse the database or our own API. This is all the API that is provided already by Cube, and it's one of the most exciting technologies that I've worked in the last 2 years, for sure. The other thing is that, as said, what we can do is, with the connection between tracking data and product data, is we can track and segment based down on premium users, ultimate users, and so on, and can basically go ahead and segment the data against that. We already have around here now the behavior. So you can see how many page views, how many events, what page areas were used the most, and so on. So this was basically now 5 days of implementation full time against Cube and the stuff that we can see here. Now what the idea is quite clear. I think tracking nowadays, we are, as GitLab, we have this one product for everything story. So why shouldn't we simply go ahead and not track page views, events, clicks, and stuff like that? But something that we already do in the product is we do error tracking. This is something I strongly believe has a big impact on everything that is regarding analytics. So idea is quite simple. You go ahead and say, okay, I had a funnel, and during this funnel, basically 27% of the people dropped off. So why did these people drop off? And now it's the funky time of finding that data again, that I can show you that. Let's see. That's the problem if you already do live data against this. So what you can see here is basically then a session replay. And I would love to show you the test data that I provided, because what we can do is already in this test instance, and I think the data was already pushed out, we can track the web page performance. So what we are able to do there is we can track how long did each page take loading, and we can basically highlight, okay, those pages were slower, that's where we had a funnel drop off and so on. And we are already tracking front-end exceptions. So you can see basically in this session recording, that's basically one of the pages that had an error, and you would see an error in here in between. And you can see the different clicks and all the events that we are already tracking through the current implementation. I'm basically simply sending that over to Jitsu. And that gives you much more insight, and not only for the product manager, but also for us as engineers and UX researchers, because you get full insight into a full session recording here. Taking it from there, what you can also do with Jitsu-based data is you can do, of course, funnel analysis. This is also something we can transform through the data platform. So we can basically define different funnel steps. And the other interesting part is, as said, we have all the information imported now into our ClickHouse database, which is basically our data warehouse here. And this is also something you can query against. So you can go ahead and say, okay, I want to see a list of all the GitLab namespaces on that test instance. Let's see if that works. No, it doesn't. I need to refresh. And you can basically go ahead and start building full queries and dashboard views against the data that you are basically querying. This also fully supports full, why is this not working? I don't know. I will figure it out and fix it before I deploy it. And the idea is to take all those views that you can build yourself. You can say add to the dashboard, and then go ahead and basically get this into dashboards. Axel has worked on this part, and he has already took a couple of experiments. So you can basically go ahead here and go and start the edit mode. So this is something where you can then dynamically reset and reset up basically your full dashboard, which is then simply a collection of views, which you can then, of course, share with others like we do in Sisense. And with the combination of those dashboards and everything that we have in Cube, I believe we can build something that is quite useful in a very near future based on all that information. I think I have showed now everything that I was able to show now. Any questions?
I have some questions. It's so much, Tim. That was awesome. Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to highlight, Tim and I had discussed this last week, and I actually only saw like a fraction of what Tim just presented, so it's kind of mind blowing. I think this really fits our vision, especially you know, the focus that Tim started on making sure that users can control their own data. That's a competitive differentiator for us as a product, but also a kind of critical moment in the product analytics space that I know the product intelligence team is really familiar with, that more and more users are looking to, and in some cases required to own their own data. So I had a question about data pipeline definition and where it should live, and Dennis and I had a dialogue about it. So thanks for answering my questions, Dennis. But Dennis, do you want to verbalize your response?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of detail that I'll need to cover in less than the minutes we have, but yeah, most of what we define here will be able to be defined and version controlled somewhere.
Okay.
What some things we'll need to look into. I know with the JavaScript transformations in Jitsi, their API is a little less documented there, but I'm sure there's a way where we can synchronize that so that, you know, if you have transformations being version controlled in GitLab, you could control that in Jitsi. But that's like, those are some of the odds and ends we'd have to figure out there. But for most part, when it comes to transformations or even dashboards and things like that, we want to make sure that they're like, there's a way to define them, because obviously we want to be able to have a customizable experience for users as well. And that'll be important to support.
Yeah.
That. Yeah.
I think just another point that I'll highlight, and this has been kind of lesson learned in the app section in general, is being able to trace the lineage of something. Like, we're building tools for developers. Developers want to be able to know, oh, like there's an easy button here, but if it breaks, that I can like trace what happened and how to fix it and where I can contribute to fixing it. So that's really the principle that want to make sure we lean into. We can make it very easy by default, but I want to make sure that yeah, in case something breaks, there's like a break class option.
Yeah.
Cool. Tim, I had just one clarifying. I think in the demo, you used the word product data, but the actual word on the screen was production. I think we're talking about product data. Yeah, is that true? Yeah, cool. I can't remember where it was. I think it was in the onboarding portion where you said like, yeah, do you have production? Yeah. And then Tim, you and I had talked about this, but I want to highlight just for the rest of the team, I think this is really exciting. It can create some amazing, delightful experiences you wouldn't get in any other product analytics capability. That beyond attaching your product data, you can also, like, we can by default attach your kind of software delivery or DevOps platform data. So you can think about things like showing annotations about when releases happened or when a feature flag was flipped right in your analytics dashboard. Those are things that no other tool can do by default today. That's super exciting for me. Maybe I'll just, the last one was kind of open-ended that we can talk about, Tim, about on by default, but I want to make sure, not for the POC or for initial dogfooding, but that we think about what it means so that a developer doesn't have to, before they can start using this, spin up a Kubernetes cluster. So that might be providing organizational-wide Kubernetes clusters for tracking that others can use. Yeah. And then I was super excited to see the session recording. You know, I was thinking about as a PM, what new capabilities would I be really excited to get my hands on? And I think that is especially important. It gives you a kind of qualitative understanding of user behavior that we don't get access to today. So some of those were comments, some of them were questions. Thanks, Tim. Are there other questions? I know.
Yeah, sorry for going so long and running short on time. But yeah, I think this gives us a lot of opportunities that we can think of, really connecting a lot of dots here. Because I hate that the analytics, that the session thing didn't work out. Give me a second, and I simply raised the limit on the, because what happened is that this was now deployed to, or it was pushed to GitLab, and this is starting all the pipelines, and the pipelines are creating tons of sessions, and this is basically pushing out the stuff here. Let me see if I have now changed the limit on the query so that we have a little bit more. It was something with 21 or so. Because there you can then actually see that when there was an exception raised, that we are already collecting all the same data that we are tracking and collecting right now already with Snowplow. Now, I think it was pushed out completely. I will send this afterwards, the link to it, because the target is really to take this and update our instances, the Jitsi and Cube instance today with the updated schema, and deploy exactly this branch that we have here that I demoed today, and have this again on the GitLab test instance, and then you can play around with it. As mentioned, it breaks very easily so far, but on the other hand, we have a lot of brown stuff here with Cube that gives us really the opportunity to especially focus on building stuff that people can use and view, rather taking the boring stuff away there. Yeah. Any other questions? Then Dennis, you have a 1 minute left.
Yeah, I'll just briefly speak to it. But there's a link included to the repository if you want to check it out. But basically, one of the things I've been working on is kind of dev kit for getting this tracking instance or whatever we're going to call it, Jitsi, ClickHouse, and Cube into a way that's manageable for us to also develop against locally. But also that might lend itself into how we operationalize it in terms of deploying it onto Kubernetes, because it's a single Docker Compose file. So we could use Compose and then start building a Helm chart on it to basically see how it works and test out how we want to do this in terms of like what you saw in the onboarding in terms of how we want to deploy this. But for now, it works as a development environment if you want to connect your GDK to it. So I'd love for anyone to test it out and tell me what I haven't documented. There's already a couple steps that I've missed, but feel free to check it out. But I'll save the demo for another time.
Thanks a lot, Dennis.
Yep.
And yeah, last words. Thanks a lot, Dennis and Axel, who is not around, but hopefully watches then the recording, for all the contributions to this demo. Yeah, next step is defining now from what we see that we should be capable of is really define the next step to make this reality as soon as possible, with exactly paths also how to get the real data of GitLab that we are tracking already right now, some segments out of it, or track just groups, etc. Those will be some of the next steps to get this into the product as soon as possible.
All right, then thanks everyone for going a couple minutes over. Enjoy the rest of your Mondays and your week, and we'll see everyone next time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.